Hey there, government students. Mr. Lambright here with a quick review of the basics of federalism. So, when we say federalism, we're talking about this idea of multiple layers of government. So, we have a bunch of individual states that each have their own government, but then they also have a national government that runs all of the states. If you want to add another layer, you could talk about the cities and towns as well. So, for example, we are here in Seattle, where we have a city government that we follow the laws of. We also have a state government, Washington State, that we follow the laws of. And then, of course, there's the national government that we follow those laws as well. But this idea is that federalism has those multiple layers, but sometimes they contradict. So who gets to decide which things, which layer gets to decide which things? That conversation is the basis of federalism. Now, where this comes from is during the Constitutional Convention, there were effectively two sides. There were some who favored having a strong central government. So sure, we would still have these states with their individual governments, but the one big one that rules over all of them should have the most power. These people were the Federalists. So they supported a strong federal government. And then the Anti-Federalists were the opposite. They favored the individual states and said, sure, we can still have one big government that ties them together to regulate, commerce between them, but the individual state government should have more power. And this was predominantly southern states because they were doing really well economically thanks to slavery. So we ended up with this compromise. On the one side, the Federalists got the Supremacy Clause, which basically says the Constitution, so the federal government laws, supersede that of the states. If the federal government has a power, they can enforce it on the states as much as they want. And the states can't do anything about it. But the Anti-Federalists got some exclusions for the state governments. They got the Bill of Rights, which means that all future laws have to follow the protections for individual citizens. So they can't make laws that abridge certain rights that we'll examine later. And then also they got the 10th Amendment, which says that the powers that aren't explicitly in the Constitution, so that things that it doesn't explicitly say the federal government has the power to do, those laws are reserved to the states, which means the states get to do everything else. So if it's not in the Constitution explicitly, it's a power of the states, and those are reserved powers. The way that we say powers that are explicitly in the Constitution, we say enumerated powers. That is a fancy word that you will only ever hear in government class, but I still think it's important to know. So enumerated powers in the Constitution explicitly, reserved powers, everything else.